Welcome to our Beyond 20 campaign, a celebration of One Joshua Group's 20 years of service excellence. This is a One Joshua Group production, providing access to information and experts to help improve quality of life and health outcomes.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of our Beyond 20 podcast, where One Joshua Group is celebrating our 20th anniversary. And we do that by bringing together friends of One Joshua Group who's helped us along this 20-year journey. And we certainly could not have this celebration without including our dear friend, Dr. Bennie L. Harris, who's Chancellor of the University of South Carolina, Upstate. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Harris.
Thank you, Kermit.
Well, first of all, congratulations on being the 5th president of the University of South Carolina at Upstate.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you. I'm excited about it. We're having a great time right now.
Good. So what is that like? Well, tell us what it's like and tell us about your journey to get to be president of an institution.
Well, what it's like for me is wonderful, and that I have the opportunity really to set a vision and a course that impact young people's lives for a lifetime, right? And so my personal mission statement and my purpose statement really is to inspire and develop young people to change the world. And that being who I am, that being what wakes me up in the morning, get me excited about going to work, and to lead an education institution, because I do believe education is so important. Is critical and was critical in my life, to me leaving poverty to being able to sit in this role. So it is great to look out on campus, to go to classrooms and see the young folks whose lives I am impacting. It's exciting to be a part of an organization whose mission so aligned with what that purpose is.
Well,
so I know you talked about. Go ahead.
No, after you. Go ahead.
No, you asked me to tell the journey. The journey can be quite interesting. So just stop me whenever you want to. But I really did not aspire to the presidency until probably 15 years ago, or a little less. I knew I wanted to be a vice president and higher education, and I thought it would probably be the student affairs route. But as I got into institutional advancement, I then I got my PhD from the University of Alabama at Birmingham. I started seeing opportunities that I can be in academic affairs and in institutional advancement and external affairs, and kind of telling the story of why higher education is so important. And that led me to several different roles. And 2012, I believe, maybe 13 or 12, I competed for a presidency, and I did not get that presidency. And that was the thing that really helped me to see this is a place I want to be. This is a place I can do. And because my wife and I had 3 young kids, we committed, it was primarily her decision that we will wait until our kids are out of high school and before we're able to pursue that, because she wanted to make sure that we were present. And I think that was one of the best decisions I could have made. So having left Lipscomb University, then Morehouse School of Medicine as a senior vice president there, I felt well prepared to compete, to lead an institution and to help chart a mission for it. And hence the University of South Carolina Upstate. Very diverse institution and a very strategic part of the state. It's a comprehensive regional university, and hence mean that our students can leave from here and go straight to work, or they can leave from here and go to graduate school. Matter of fact, 100% of the students who apply to medical school from USC Upstate get accepted, those who apply. So our faculty are doing a phenomenal job here.
So, Ben, I want to ask you, you said about 15 years ago, and you saw the opportunity to move into a senior executive leadership position. What caused you to see that you could be more than what you thought you were going to be prior to 15 years ago?
Well, I think a lot of that happened and just part of who I am and how I
Hmm.
was raised. I think my parents always raised us. There were 8 of us to be our very best. So even I can recall my dad was a farmer, a cotton farmer. I can recall when I was ninth grade, I was on our tractor in our field um, applying the fields, and I always had a vivid imagination. So I was. It could have been the heat because this is the Delta Mississippi, so it's very hot in the summertime, or it could have been just part of that imagination. But I imagined myself uh, being the governor of the state of Mississippi, and I was delivering an inauguration speech. So I find it quite interesting to grow up in a segregated environment, to in a small rural school, to come from a rural household where our annual income may have been somewhere around $9,000, and to live on a farm, but yet to have a vision and to imagine that this young African American kid could be the governor. And that was a real vision for me. I had teachers, black and white, who poured dreams into me and who believed in me. So, what made me think that I could become a president? As I moved, I always wanted to have a greater impact. And so,
Hmm.
throughout my career, whether I was an assistant director or program coordinator or director, I aspired to have a greater impact, to do more. So I never really saw the work that I did as being limited to a job description. I really saw the work that I did being informed by mission and purpose, regardless of what
Hmm.
the scope of that was.
So, mentoring and leadership. What do you believe what role do you think mentoring has in a leadership position like a university president?
Well, thank you. That's a very important question. I think people underestimate the power of mentoring. Mentoring is so important. At one phase of my career, mentoring me meant that someone believed in me, helped me to aspire to things that I wanted to do, um, will guide me along the way, will support me. Uh, as you grow up in your career, those mentors become peers in
Hmm.
many ways. So, and then as you mature and you become a professional, it may not be a mentor, but it may be a sponsor. And
Hmm.
so that sponsor now is there to say, I believe in Benny, I believe in this person, and I'm going to sponsor you to that next level of leadership, the next level of
Hmm.
opportunity. And oftentimes that sponsor becomes a person who credentials you. I think
Hmm.
credentialing is so important as it relates to leadership. What you're saying when you call and say, hey, Dr. Harris is the person you need to talk to. And
Hmm.
you've done that. Matter of fact, you personally have introduced me to a number of folks. And what you're really doing is credentialing me and
Hmm.
vouching for me that you can trust this guy. He can add value to you. And so I think you should be in this particular engagement with him or with her. So mentoring grows to sponsorship. Sponsorship then has a way of lending itself to the credentialing of an individual, and that opens doors for you. And I think that's all a part of leadership. And quite
Hmm.
frankly, the people who do that work really become great servant leaders. When you
Hmm.
think about servant leader, not just we think about leadership, we talk about transactional leadership, transformational leaders, all those types of things. But I think a servant leader really encompass and incorporate all of those types of leadership models.
So I really thank you for that. It's easier to mentor than it is to sponsor. And it's certainly a lot more challenging to credential because you really put your reputation on the line when you do that. You can spend some time with
Exactly.
people, but introducing someone to someone else says, well, Dr. Harris sent me. And when you show up with someone and you can show up and they say, well, Dr. Harris sent me, and that's all you have to say. So in that, it's not always just the message or the messenger, but it's who sends the messenger. And that's a part of the credentialing that you talked about. Do you think that there is a reasonable representation of Black students and Black faculty in the levels of higher education?
If you would indulge me, let me um, give you an additional thought about mentoring, sponsorship,
We
and
can do that.
credentialing, and then I will answer
Okay.
the question. There are people that I have mentored that I have chosen not to sponsor just because of what you articulated. And there are people who I have sponsored in certain leadership roles and certain roles that I've decided that for whatever reason, I don't want a credential for a particular type of engagement. And it could be because I know enough about that person to know that he or she would not be successful at that, or I don't trust that. I know enough about this mentor relationship to say that this young man or this young woman is not going to follow through, so I'm not going to sponsor you. And so I don't want to tie my name, my reputation to while I will mentor you, but I'm not going to sponsor you into an opportunity because you're not ready yet. And so I think you brought out a really key point that all of those are uniquely different. And the person who's doing the mentoring or the sponsor or the credentialing has to assess that. And he or she assess that as it relates to their own character and their own value and bank of experiences. So I do think that's an important delineation regarding each of those roles. As it relates to the question that you just asked, do I think that there are a sufficient number of African Americans and leadership in higher education? Is that the question that I get?
It is.
And my answer is no, in terms of in leadership. If you're looking at a historically Black university, you're going to see them there. When you look at majority institutions, you don't see them as much. I think the last couple of years, particularly as an influence of COVID, I believe, and the influence, the elevation that we're still divided among races, you saw an increased presence of African American taking on leadership roles, particularly CEO, president's role in higher education at majority institutions. I think that with COVID and the disproportionate impact that COVID had on communities of color, and that we were left in a space where we couldn't go anywhere but look at the television. We saw the George Floyd incident, and we didn't have a choice but to look at that. And I think we saw that differently. We didn't see it as just someone crying wolf. We actually saw what was happening, very much reminiscent to what happened with Rodney King several decades back. So those things brought an awareness to boards that we are not doing enough. It brought an awareness to faculty that we are not doing enough, that we needed people who look like me to be in these roles. And when you think about it, many of our institutions, the diversity or the ethnic minority populations are shifting. And so you're finding schools that have 60% students of color or 70% students of color who still very much they're very much committed to having an all majority leadership. And I think that's going to be problematic.
Now, I have a question for you, sir. You're a Black man, right? And you
Yes.
are and you are in a majority institution. What was that like coming from a Morehouse School of Medicine, going to a University of South Carolina Upstate as a Black man?
The politics of race becomes intensified, right? So you have to think about your leadership from the perspective of being extremely inclusive, because as new as it is for, let's say, me, it is equally new for the people that I will be serving, right? So part of what one has to do in those roles is make sure everyone feels that they have a seat at the table. Because
Mm-hmm.
there's going to be an insecurity among people who are not used to folks in this role to feel that I will show a favoritism for those things. So I have to think about the politics of race. I have to think about the leadership frame of race. Now, for me, having been at Morehouse School of Medicine um, was not the sum total of my experience, right? So I've worked at Lipscomb University, which was a majority very conservative institution. I worked at DePaul University, um, University of Alabama at Birmingham. So I'd worked at many majority institutions, and I had learned to be comfortable in those spaces. I
Mm-hmm.
learned that my skills and my experiences have value, and but still, even in those spaces, there's the politics of race, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, so for me, it was not as big a leap as it is or maybe for others, because
Mm-hmm.
I've had experiences in many areas uh, of diverse population. When I worked in Washington State University, that's probably was the very best place for me to grow and mature. I experienced a global environment
Mm-hmm.
in the Pacific Northwest. So I had very little experience with working with Asian people, people of Asian descent, had very little experience of working with immigrants from Ukraine and other areas of the world. Very little experience working with Mexican and Chicanos and Puerto Ricans. And Washington State really provided me that classroom of learning cultures, learning experiences, learning about Japanese heritage in America, learning about a number of different entities in America. Uh, and all of us have stories. All of us have experiences of being marginalized. So while I came from a black and white environment in Mississippi, when I went to the state of Washington, I really got a great lesson in
Mm-hmm.
diversity. I got a great lesson in gender equity, etc., which really helped me to mature to become a more inclusive leader as an African American male.
Mm-hmm.
So I was able to move beyond the frame of black and white
Mm-hmm.
to a frame of a tapestry of cultures and
Mm-hmm.
gender and those types.
So, Dr. Harris, I think it's so important that uh, all of those people who are interested in being successful remember that you need a broad opportunity of experience. And as you said, you need to recognize that there is another side of the coin, and to be able to understand all of the perspectives in order to be an effective leader, and also to step outside of yourself and your comfort zone. And I believe the more we step outside of ourselves, the better our comfort zone becomes. And certainly the comfort zone becomes bigger. If you could speak to a younger person who aspire to be in a position similar to yours, what are the three things, two, one, how many ever you want to give us, that you would recommend they pursue in order to be a leader? I think that the
Uh,
industry may differ, but leadership skills. What kind of leadership skills do you recommend those people who aspire to executive positions undertake?
so great question. There are some practical skills that you got to have a mindset for. There are some leadership skills, and I put, and not many people talk about this, but a friend of mine, Rainer Lone, wrote a book by 13 Emotions of Leadership, right? I think leadership has a big emotional component that we understate and underestimate. So I will first say to people how that is important how you emotionally show up. Okay? And that's important.
Mm-hmm.
One thing is if we lean on our previous conversation and think about leadership as a table, you want to make sure you have as much diversity at that table as you can. There's plenty of room at the table for other ideas, for other perspectives as well. And believe that the table is not there's not a zero sum game. There are
Mm-hmm.
permanent gain, I lose. And oftentimes that emotion of envy, that emotion of fear, that emotion that I'm going to lose out because of something you're going to get is is something that you have to guard yourself from. So I would say number one, it is critical how you show up emotionally in leadership roles. Okay, if I can give a really simple example, too, is that another one is follow your passion. Now, you said leadership skills. I think you have to undergird those skills and what's important. A lot of people will work on a job because it's more money and blah, 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 and have no passion for it at all.
Mm-hmm.
I am an engineer by training, but I never had passion for engineering. I was in engineering because as a young black man in the Delta, Mississippi, the way out of poverty was to get a science or an engineering degree, right? And so I did that. And I had very little passion. I wanted to be a high school math teacher. But I went that way. When I found the courage to follow my passion, even though I was criticized by my peers for taking a job paying $24,000 instead of a job paying $54,000 in engineering when I graduated, has made all the difference in my joy and in my career.
Mm-hmm.
So follow your passion. Don't follow the money, because the money will come. It's almost as the scripture says, seek ye first God's kingdom and all these other things will be added unto you. I believe strongly that if you follow your passion, the things that you aspire in life, they will take place because you will show up different.
Mm-hmm.
Continue to develop yourself. Continue to grow. So I wouldn't necessarily say the skills, communication, and all of those things you so easily think of, but I do think you and you have heard me share the story about the empty cup. Here's a cup that I have, and I had this cup inscribed with something that my mother said to me, and she said, "Live life with an empty cup. There should always be room in your cup to receive input from others."
Mm-hmm.
Charlie May Harris.
Mm-hmm.
While my mother's deceased, but this is a leadership model of being inclusive. So she was giving me a basic lesson. Benny, your cup is too full. You need to have an empty cup.
Mm-hmm.
You got to have room in your cup. She said, you can always pour it out if you don't want it when you leave. But when you sit before anyone, allow yourself to receive input from it. And I think that's an important leadership skill.
Mm-hmm.
And people see that. People see humility. They see that type of servant attitude, and they want to invite you to the table as a result.
Mm-hmm.
And having the competencies is a gift. You need to know what you're doing and be smart in what you're doing. But it's these other skills and these other things that are going to make the difference with that trajectory, I believe, and how successful you are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember when we first met, and I didn't know who you were, and I saw you standing across the room, and you just talked about that, and in my mind, I said, I wonder who that man is. So, showing up emotionally, being present, letting people know that you're not invisible. All of those are extremely important. And we hear so much, Dr. Harris, about, if there's not a seat at the table, bring a folding chair. But you need to have something when you sit at the table. You just told us you need to come with something, because space will be made for you at the table if you come with something. It's not just enough to have a seat at the table. You've got to bring something, as you mentioned, with you to the table so that people are interested in what you have to say. What do you think has been the most challenging on your journey, this journey to the presidency? I think you've had other journeys to other presidencies. I won't say anything about that blue and white on the back of the wall, but your journey to other presidencies, what's been a greater challenge, some of the great challenges you've had into this kind of executive leadership position?
Learning to navigate rejection.
Mm.
I talked about the first presidency that I applied for in 2012, I believe. And then in 2020, achieving the presidency of USC Upstate, right? The chancellorship of USC Upstate. In between, there were rejections. And in between, believing that I am the best qualified for that role, and they did not choose. It's easy to give up. It's easy to, and so that within itself, that journey is recognizing, and we have all these cliches that rejection is an opportunity for, is a setup for a comeback, all these types of things. But it's truly, those are true things. And what you do in that space is learn to take rejection to build resilience. Because resiliency is so important. Um, when I applied for the job here at USC Upstate, when I competed rather for the job here at USC Upstate, it was amazing the amount of confidence I had going through that process. And I think not arrogance, but confidence. I think that confidence and enthusiasm came through as being authentic and genuine. I was able to tell my story in a much more, in a clear way, more articulate. As I told that story, I was able to communicate my passion, and people were able to see who I really am. And I think folks resonated. But had it not been for the journey of getting there, I don't think I would have been in that space to do that. And so that process allowed me to figure out my authentic leadership self, right? And that carries on even in this role where I currently am. I've been here 2 years, I'm in my third year now, and I think I'm still myself. I still will break out and sing a temptation song. I still would use levity to lift up the room. That's just who I uniquely am. And I still would deliver on a major, major transition for the institution. And we have accomplished so much in such a short time. So I do think all that's relatively important.
So, as I understand, you also ordained to the clergy.
Yes.
So, I'd want to talk about the issue of spirituality, whatever you define that as, or whatever we define that as for ourselves. Can we talk about the relationship of leadership and spirituality?
I think it's a misnomer for one to believe that we separate that entirely. That I think leadership and spirituality, or even your religious heritage or faith, do have an impact and do intertwine. However, I think the maturity of that leadership and the maturity of understanding that is recognizing that the role that I sit in, the seat that I've chosen to sit in, is a seat that I represent everybody regardless of what perspective. And that all of those folks, all of those individuals have the right for dignity and respect of who they are. So that's a leadership role. And I very comfortably separate that from even whatever beliefs and those types of things that I may have. When I come to you, whether you are Jewish, or Hindu, or atheist, I give you the due respect and believe that you have a right to participate fairly in whatever space that you choose to participate in. And I think that's really leadership. That's really understanding how to have a faith tradition identity and how to lead the diversity of people, right? So, and I don't think Christ called us to make a decision for you about in that particular space, right? So there's a guy named Eboo Patel. He was on Obama's administration, but I had met him in Chicago before. And what Eboo did, he had an organization that brought together different faith communities of young people, whether they were Jewish, Hindu, Christian, whatever they are. And they would do common things together. Where do we have common ideas, common perspectives? And most of it was around service. So one may think that people who are Jewish may be influenced to become Christian, or people who are Christian were influenced to become Hindu or Baha, whatever those faiths are. What he found and that practice where people became strengthened in their own faith identity as a result of serving others and working together collectively. And I found that really, really telling to say that you can be in a community that's different and something that is so important to you and work towards common goals. So I do think that spirituality, religious identity, and leadership all align
Mm-hmm.
and work together. And it's not an either or. It's not one against the other. It goes back to this, right, that I talked about earlier. There should always be room in your cup to receive input and ideas and perspectives.
Yeah, for me, the component of spirituality is really where you're authentic. That's who you are. It's from the core of you as an individual, and also as an effective leader. Like spirituality, it is unconditional. That you're able to separate this, I didn't say good, from the bad. I just said this from that, and to be able to make a decision, an unconditional decision. Um, and I have to thank you because I think that I believe we supported each other. And I'll tell you that Dr. Harris as a chancellor is no different than Bennie Harris as the man. When you see
Yeah.
him, you see Bennie, you see Dr. Harris, and he's always accommodating. He does indeed be sure that everybody knows everybody in the room. So he's very, very comfortable in getting that done. As the challenge of a university chancellor president, how difficult is it to go into a new community and be able to create those kind of leadership relationships?
It's not challenging for me at all. I think my first year here, I spread myself very thin. That's just, good or bad. That's what I did because I wanted to meet a lot of people. And this year, I'm digging deep in those relationships. Okay. And I want to make sure that people feel I see them and I hear them. So part of my leadership style is to be extremely inclusive. So I did choose to engage in a number. So I really can appreciate my wife saying, "Hey, let's not do this until the kids are adults or out of the house," because I am giving a lot of myself to the community. Having lived in about 5 different communities, I've learned to be nimble. What I love about that, relationships that I built in Washington, I still have. Relationships that we built in Birmingham, we still have. Relationships that we built in Chicago, we still have. Relationships that we built in Atlanta, we still have, right? And we're going to continue those relationships here. So it hasn't been difficult for me, probably because of the way I'm wired, but also I came up to a part of higher education where relationships are a premium, and that's institutional advancement external affairs. So I had to build those relationships, and I had to be nimble in understanding how to yield myself and to elevate and amplify you in what you're saying and in your perspective. Because to raise money is not about me; it's about you experiencing what's important to you through whatever institution I was representing. Right? So I think those are skills, and my wife is pretty good at it. Frankly, she's very good at that as well.
So we're seeing a shift in education. I don't know whether it's paradigm or whether it's people or the climate or whatever it is, but we're clearly seeing some changes in education. How do you see that we will need to adjust to these changes in education? And will everybody need to go to the University of South Carolina Upstate to have an improved quality of life?
Well, I think that's important. My wife and I took vacation in Europe, and we started out with a spiritual retreat in Oxford, and we spent about that's about three or 4 days there. And we listened to a number of speakers talk about AI and spirituality, talked about C.S. Lewis and Screwtape Letters, and then we left there and went over to Paris. But one thing I noticed about some of those tours is that you go to all these beautiful, beautiful, magnificent churches, cathedrals, all those things. And I reflected on that. I said, one time these places were places of worship. They were filled with people in the local community coming there to worship. Now they are museums and having visitors from all over the world observing the architecture, observing the historical places. So I believe churches for more than 2,000 years, or at least more than 1,000 years, remained the same. They didn't change. And as a result, they became less and less relevant. And so I think higher education is an institution similar to churches, where we have been the same. We don our regalia, and I love that part. I love the pomp and circumstance of commencement and convocations, but we have stayed the same, and all of that is rooted in traditions. So all of a sudden, we're faced with change, which I think is good change. And those institutions who are nimble enough to say that we are preparing you for careers that do not currently exist. We're not just preparing you to do a job today, but we're preparing you to think and to be creative and to be provocative and to innovate. And so I think that's the role of higher education. And our faculty and when you look at tenure, we look at a number of things. All of those are traditions to keep things the same. But if you can take those same traditions and say, how can I be nimble? How can I be creative in that? You know, I delivered a University Day address, and I leaned into an analogy that I went out and measured the windshield of my car, and it was about 5,380 some square inches, right? Then I measured the rearview mirror of my car, which was 26 square inches. When I come to realize that the rearview mirror is 70 times, the windshield is 70 times larger than my rearview mirror. Really lends to this analogy that I should spend 70 times more looking in the future than looking back, right? So that's where your opportunity, that's where your potential is. And if you can come and appreciate that the magnitude and the speed of change has narrowed itself so much from when you had the horse wagon to the automobile to the airplanes to the jet, and the speed of change is so narrow. From having a cell phone to what's going to be next. Automobiles that had gas and diesel, now you have electrical cars. Now you have all types of things. So change is inevitable. An institution that's going to survive have to get comfortable with change.
So thank you for that daily aspiration. You heard it from Dr. Bennie Harris, the 5th Chancellor of the University of South Carolina Upstate. Spend more time looking in the future than looking back. And Dr. Harris has given us a lot of information. And Ben, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. And thank you for helping us, One Joshua Group, celebrate our Beyond 20. And thank all of you for joining us for this. This is Kermit Payne, and you've joined us for our 20th Beyond celebration. Dr. Harris, we'll see you very soon. And for all of you, we hope to see you for our future podcast. Thank you again, Dr. Harris.
Thank you. And I should have started with the congratulations for your 20 years.
Oh, we got it. You didn't say it, but you show it. Thank you very much for that.
Okay.
This edition of Beyond 20 is a Life Beat podcast sponsored by One Joshua Group, your strategic source of engagement to improve life through better health, education, and information. For more information, visit us at theonejoshuagroup.com or follow our work on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter using hashtag OneJGCollabs. One Joshua Group, building capacity, expanding resources, joining what you know with what we've learned.